think we're probably good to call the meeting to order. It's 5:02, 5:01, and might as well get into business. We're just missing one police board member, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to make it or not, because he's usually on time. So we'll just, I think, call the meeting to order. I just, before I do that, I just want to make sure everybody knows that this is, you'll notice that on there, that's the screen of our, it's kind of a pan wide angle shot of our table. It is being live webcast, and it will be on YouTube and viewable later. So we are very much in the public realm here, and so just a heads up on that. Well, I think we can eat because we're probably small enough on the screen not to be too visible. So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and as this is a special Oak Bay Council Committee of the Whole / Police Board meeting, structured in as a committee of the whole with a police board invited in. We gather here. We acknowledge both at the council and at the police board meetings every time that we gather in these and work in the traditional territories of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen people, known as the Songhees and Esquimalt Nation, and that their connections to these lands and adjoining waters continues to this day. We have up first, and the voting will only happen with the council because that's the nature of this beast. Can we just get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? I was discussing with staff whether we need to suspend the rules of procedure, but frankly we don't, because it's committee of the whole. We're not making any decisions here. It's just a chance for us to gather together and get a chance to meet each other. I thought the first thing we should do, though, is just go around the table and introduce ourselves. Maybe just a little bit about yourself, how long you've been on the board or council, and that's pretty much it. So I can go either way here. Hazel, you're used to doing this, I think, so I'll go to my left here and introduce Hazel.
Hi, I'm Hazel Braithwaite.
Can you use the microphones? Just
Sorry.
our microphones, if you haven't used them before, you have to just push the button to turn them on.
Hazel Braithwaite. I've been on council from 2005 to 2011 and 2014 to present. And that's all.
Leslie Watson, first-time councillor, so the first opportunity to sit with you guys and meet the board, so wonderful.
Councillor Astor Patterson, this is my second term.
I'm Councillor Andrew Appleton, also my second term.
Hi, I'm Police Board Member Heather Cochran. I just had my 1-year anniversary of being on the Police Board and was just reappointed for a further term. Nice to see you all here.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Hall. I've been on the Oak Bay Police Board this is my 3rd year, and nice to meet everyone.
And I'm Wendy Zink. I am in the final stretch of my last year on the police board. So I was appointed in 2018.
Julie Shannon, Oak Bay Police Department Deputy Chief, and I've been with Oak Bay for 12 years.
Mark Fisher, the Chief Constable, Oak Bay Police Department. I've been with the department total close to 6 years. Most recently, I can't remember now.
August 2020?
I guess, yeah, 3 years.
I'm Corinne Green. I had 2 terms in North Saanich and then moved back to Oak Bay, and this is my 3rd term on council in Oak Bay.
And I'm Carrie Smart, and this is my 1st term on council. It's nice to meet you.
And joining us all the way from online, we have Andrew Weaver. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, thank you. I'm Andrew Weaver. I'm actually in the Oak Bay part of the UVic territory right now. Couldn't make it down. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I've been on the Oak Bay Police Board with Heather for exactly 1 year. Also just celebrated my university and was reappointed as well.
Great, thank you. And I'm Kevin Murdoch, so I've been on council since 2011 and mayor for the last 4.5 years. So my term as police board has been 4.5 years because, as you probably know, I get appointed automatically to the police board as the mayor. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. This is an informal gathering. You saw on the agenda, all you have there is really our draft strategic plan that the board has been working on with a bunch of input from the public and other places. I thought I would let the chief kind of just give council a little update in terms of what that process was and how we got there. But as I was thinking about this, I thought I might actually, and if the police board is going to have to forgive me a little bit on this, because you all know it inside and out, but I thought I might just give a little framework for the Oak Bay Police Department, municipal police governance and so forth in general, because sometimes I think we all get busy in our own things, and this is kind of a hidden world of policing. So I just scribbled some notes this morning as I was thinking about it. We have, the police board has very specific roles and responsibilities. They're specified under the Police Act. So there's police services in the province that oversees police boards. There's a couple of nuances in police boards that are a little different than most boards that we sit on. For one, the board actually acts as the employer of all the sworn and civilian staff in the police department. So unlike our single employer model that we have at the municipality, for instance, we actually are the official employer of all. And we have a bit more responsibility for some of the discipline and policy complaints. Otherwise, pretty similar in terms of setting priorities, goals, and developing the departmental budget and those sorts of things. So on our board, any board in BC, it's one municipal appointee. And then there's as many more on the board as are left come from the province. They go through the Cabro appointment process. And then the mayor, though the mayor's appointment is likely to change just because that was one of the recommendations coming out of the recent Police Act review. And as they noted, a couple of people noted, they've done their first term. So typically when they're appointed by the province, that appointment happens you get appointed for 1 year. The board chair is asked how they're doing, and I think I believe the person is asked how they're enjoying it. I usually just ask the question to make sure they're interested in staying. Then they're typically appointed for a 2-year term and then a 3-year term, and that's a total of 6 years. And then at that point, they've maxed out. I'm personally hopeful they extend that to 8 years because honestly, it's an incredibly steep learning curve in the police world. You don't have to stay, Wendy. You don't have to stay. It's optional.
I put forward a motion that Wendy stay.
We'll make sure.
I'm joking.
We have, and so just some of the other current context. I mentioned the province, as you probably know, just had a special committee to modernize the Police Act. They came up with a wide range of recommendations, most of which need some work at a staff level to see how or if they can be implemented. But the staff level now is actively looking at implementing in stages some of those recommendations. So you'll start seeing some of those changes come over the next probably 6 to 12 months. Ultimately, the Director of Police Services is sort of the sub-person within the province that helps the municipal police forces do their job, and in fact is responsible for both municipal and RCMP policing in the province. In addition to the police board, there's actually quite a few other little areas that touch on policing, and I thought I'd just kind of give a little précis of some of those. One is UBCM actually has a public safety committee. So that looks at all things emergency, including things like fires, flooding, and policing related items. I currently sit on that committee as a representative of the BC Association of Police Boards, which is the governing or the sort of voice to the province from all of the municipal police boards. That's another sort of entity that you probably should be aware of. So every police board has an appointee to that executive, and they have an annual conference, and that body works. And then it's looking for some more support from the province because the province tends to use them a lot for consultation and so forth, and yet has no resources attached to it. There's a similar body, the CAPG, the Canadian Association of Police Board Governance, Police Association of Police Governance, which is a national entity, and they also have some chair sessions as well across Canada. Oak Bay, I'll just come back to that. The Oak Bay Police really has a high focus on community policing, which I'll touch on in a bit more detail. But as a result of being a small detachment, we have contracted services for quite a few of our things as they get escalated. So specialized investigations, detective work, lab work, some of the court preparation pieces, and the case administration side of the equation, the jail. Dogs is our CMP is the other, so that's another contract that we have that's very specific. And then there's integrated police units as well. So no police department can do everything, and there's efficiency and scale. So where needed, you probably heard of VMQ or Vancouver Island Major Crimes Unit. So if there's ever a murder anywhere in Vancouver, almost anywhere in Vancouver Island, both RCMP and municipal, they'll get escalated to VMQ, who handle a specialized investigation. piece of that, but there's also mobile youth services team, a regional domestic violence unit. I wrote them down because I never remember them all. The integrated mobile crisis response team, Greater Victoria Emergency Response Team, which is sort of the SWAT equivalent, and RCMP has their own version of that. That's not with RCMP, and a crowd management unit. And then there's also committees like the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Committee and some others that integrated road safety unit that does some traffic safety. Oak Bay participates in pretty much all of those almost, and so we get some of those specialized services. Occasionally we'll see an integrated like road safety unit in Oak Bay as they're doing some traffic enforcement, as we pay into that. And interestingly, every police department provides officers to those units as well. So we don't have one in every unit, but at various times, various officers will get seconded to those units, and that gives them an opportunity for some unique experiences and so forth. So they can, even in a small detachment, you can do some interesting stuff. And I'm going to finish this with a couple of thoughts I have on community policing, because it is what we do, and Oak Bay tries to be a center of excellence, and I think it's helpful to kind of keep that framework in mind as you look through the strategic plan. And I tend to use this analogy a lot, which is that community policing, to my mind, is very much like family practice is for medicine. It's the touch point that if it's working really, really well, you catch things early, you manage the situations well. Similarly, it's been kind of ignored for a long time. I think the focus on policing has largely been on some of it's been like, oh yeah, you do that, but the really important policing is over here. In Oak Bay, especially over the last 10 or 15 years, has really, I'd say, really focus on making community policing core and center to the community, trying to make sure it's been responsive, and through that way building trust and relationship with the community that it serves. Robert Peel, when he established modern policing in England, that was one of his core tenets, that the police had to be part of the communities that they served. They had to be trusted. And in fact, this is blunt as saying, you can't have policing without trust of the community they serve. And so that's really a fundamental tenet of what the police board does. The police board, of course, is civilian, and so that civilian oversight is embedded in BC and most of North America, but really more in Canada than the US, and in BC, I think stronger than in some other jurisdictions. It's arm's length from council, so I sit on the police board as a touch point from council. I actually don't vote. I'm not allowed to vote unless there's a tie, and then I cast a tie-breaking vote. But we have 6 people on the police board, so someone has to be missing for it to be a tie, because otherwise it'll be a 3-2 or a 2-3 vote in most cases. So, and then one person that's not here is Lawrence Lewis, who has been on the board for also about a year. Most of them came on about the same time. Lawrence is a great asset to us on the board. He does a lot of work in governance. He's sat on a number of boards, sat on a school board in the past, and manages an organization that does primarily elections for First Nations around BC. So he may join us here in a little bit, and I'll let him introduce himself at that time. But that's sort of the context of the police board. And that was kind of just what I blurted down on my piece of paper as I was this morning. So if there's anything that the board feels like I should add into that or cover off, okay? All the high points. I will say to the council, an incredible board, honestly. Really you didn't touch on your backgrounds or anything else, but we have everything from lawyers working in the criminal justice system to doctors who are renowned experts in use of force for police, and all kinds of things that come into this that make our discussions around the table extraordinarily valuable, I would say. Similarly, on our other side, council has been fantastic. We have a wonderful mix of 2 new, 2 second term, and then 2 longer serving councillors that mix of experience and knowledge has been really valuable on our council. So yeah, I'll do that. And then so from a strategic planning perspective, why don't I give it to you, Chief, or I'm not sure if Chief or Deputy Chief, to provide a little overview of what the process was to get to this point of the strategic plan, and then I think we can just kind of have a conversation about what council saw in that plan, and any sort of feedback. And it's going to be pretty. I've been kind of dominating here, and I apologize, but this is intended to be pretty informal. I just wanted to make sure we had kind of a baseline. So go ahead. Sure. And in fact, I might just change the first names at this point, just because we are quite casual typically in our police board meetings as well. So, Mark. Sounds good. Mark, can you turn on your microphone?
So we started this process in early 2022 to look at establishing a 3-year strategic plan, a renewal. We do one every 3 years. And at the start of it, we do another check-in. So we don't make assumptions, which is what I've seen in some other is of importance. I think the process we followed this time proved that point in what we heard from the community about what some of their priorities were, and I'll get into a bit of detail on that in a minute. So we started with meetings with key partners, face-to-face. There was about 20 key partners that we met with, including all of the members of previous council. We met with all of the school principals, the chairs of the parent advisory groups from each of those schools, and that includes the private schools in Oak Bay, the Business Improvement Association, Faith Leader in the community, a couple of service groups, and then some of the key partners in the municipality that we work with, Oak Bay Rec, the fire department, and other key partners, as well as seniors outreach and Oak Bay Volunteer Services, because we have a lot of engagement with some of their clients in providing support in that community policing model. To get some feedback from them, we asked the exact same questions that we asked in the digital survey, which we put available to the public on both our Twitter and website, and also some awareness through Oak Bay News in an article there when we rolled out that survey. We had about 500 responses to the survey, and some interesting pieces, that some that didn't surprise us and some that did, so I'll go through a few of those. 40% of the respondents to the online survey had never dealt with the police department, but they took the time to fill out the survey, which I found interesting. Another piece to keep in mind in context is at the time that we did these surveys was on the heel of the Defund the Police movement. That was alive and well in the media and some of the discussions. So we took that into context as we read some of the results. Having said that, we still had about, I think it was 8.4 out of 10 was the rating they gave us on how they rated their experience for those that did deal with the police department, and how satisfied they were with it, which I was quite happy with, especially given the context of the time. We asked them to rank their top 3 concerns, and we gave them a selection of about 10 options, but also left openings for them to provide input on options that they felt were priorities in the community. Road safety was number 1, which really wasn't any surprise. In any community I've worked in, road safety is always in the top 3. Varies where it lands there, but it always ends up in the top 3. Theft. And then the third one was the surprise, was domestic violence. And I didn't see that coming in this community, given we don't have a high reporting rate of domestic violence in the community. Those that do obviously are investigated to the nth degree, given the provincial regulations and standards around that and our own policies around it. But to see it come from that community level without any prompting, ranking ahead of things like drugs, street disorder, mischief, graffiti, was surprising to us. And you'll see that reflected in some of the initiatives that we undertook or are undertaking in the plan, are reflective of the fact that the community identified that as such a serious concern to rank in the top 3. We also broke it down in what would you like to see us doing from a proactive perspective, aside from the reported calls to police. And in that area, they wanted us focusing on youth, which again wasn't a big surprise, road safety, and then seniors and mental health were sort of ranked around the same. 75% of them felt that they were adequately informed about policing issues in the community. Most of them getting that through Oak Bay News and then the Times Colonist. I thought there might be a little higher level of awareness of that through Twitter, but we didn't see that in the survey results. And again, they're accessing the survey through an online form, so I've been interested in that. 87% felt that the police department was accountable. So we didn't break down accountability on fiscally or anything else, just accountable in general, very general question around that. 97% of them felt safe in Oak Bay, which I think is the highest, the most important measure, I think, in the whole survey that is of importance to us and what we're trying to achieve in a community. How we do that, you can take different approaches, but that's really the end goal, is do people feel safe in the community that we're entrusted to keep them safe in. The other surprise was there was a question that had a piece around, or an opportunity from the talk about amalgamation of it, and there was only 2% that seemed really interested in that, in the question, which surprised me. I thought that would be a bit higher. So those are the key pieces that came out of the survey piece. In the face-to-face discussions we had with community leaders and key partners in the community, a real strong desire to continue with that no call too small and the personal approach to take your time on calls that come through and the follow-through that they've seen historically from the department. They definitely noticed the change in diversity within the department as far as the balancing of the male-female quotient was very noticeable to them. And I was happy to see that they're noticing that, because there was real concerted effort that went in over the past 3 or 4 years to promote that and try to make that happen from both the previous chief and deputy that were there at the time. They felt that we were approachable and that we responded in a timely manner. The only negative feedback of any substance that we heard in the face-to-face interviews was around ECOM, which is the dispatch service that we contract out to, and delays in them calling into ECOM and getting what they felt was an appropriate response and a timely response from ECOM. That's something we've been dealing with, all police agencies have been dealing with over the past 1.5 years, 2 years as a challenge. But I think it gets felt even more when you're trying to advocate a policing model like we are that is based really on that no call too small and the human approach and a personal approach, and then your first point of contact into that system, if you're not stopping by the station, is dealing with ECOM and the delays that were associated at that time. There have been some improvements in that over the past couple of months, both in staffing levels in ECOM and some technology that they're implementing that have improved some of those responses on call times, but again, that was a piece that came through loud and clear, I think, in some of the survey results that we saw. Once we had that information, we brought it to the board and shared it with the board, all of the results as well as the comments that were attached to each of those surveys, and had some initial meetings with the board to set up a facilitator, Ashley Whitworth, who we used to guide us through this process. Ashley has fantastic experience in working with organizations big and small in developing strategic plans, and the board felt that was important that we make use of that guidance, and it was very helpful as we started right off with visioning and mission statements, et cetera, and doing some work on that, which hadn't been done in the past to any great degree that I'm aware of, and needed some work. So we really focused on that at the outset with some facilitated planning sessions with the police board members and both the deputy and I. As well, we had an all-staff meeting with all of our employees to talk about the fact that we're doing a refresh of the plan, any input that they may have or concerns, both from a policing perspective, but also from an employee perspective on wellness and retention and things that they felt were important. That, in hindsight, was quite important because it's become even more important over the past year around the retention issue in policing. And I'll probably talk more about that later. So we had a series of workshops both with Ashley and then without, as we developed the plan and went back and forth within the board and focused on what were identified as key areas of safety, engagement, stewardship, and then equity, diversity, and inclusion. And developed an integrated plan that the board had a lot of input to. And I think one unique thing you will see in this plan is that there's actually some objectives for the board as well. And that's not something that you see that often in a police department strategic plan, but I think it's an important piece, and it shows the level of engagement that we have from our board throughout this entire process, and the importance they attach to that process. It not just simply being a document that was drafted by the chief and deputy and then brought forward. If you want me to go through the plan itself, or how are we doing for time?
Yeah. Why don't we just take a break and then we'll just start walking casually, I think, through the document, and by all means, I think, if anybody wants to say anything at any point, just raise your hand up and I'll try and interrupt and get away. Go ahead, Councillor. Go ahead, Hazel.
Thank you, and through you to the chief. It's felt safe, and I was wondering how that compares to other municipalities, if you know. And the other one was the domestic violence, and do you associate that with COVID, or is there other reason why you might think that beyond the increase?
Through you, Your Worship. Response.
You don't have to say that every time. We're going to keep this pretty casual.
Great. That's easier for me. In response to the first question around rating, I think that's high. I think it's high for Oak Bay, which is traditionally high. Yeah. And then if you compare it to others, yes, it's high. You see sometimes in the 80s. I haven't seen a 97 anywhere I've worked, and Again, a limited sample size, and it's those that choose to engage in it, but it's still 500 people, and some in the community, some that only work in the community and accessed it. But at a time that was very tough in policing, and to come back with that high a level of feeling safe in the community, I think is really important. The domestic violence piece, I think some of it potentially COVID related. The other piece is we're seeing more exploitation through online activity and the internet, and leading to risky dating situations in some cases of all ages. This isn't restricted to the younger people in our community. We are seeing more of retirees reporting incidents. You can call it domestic violence, called dating violence. I've definitely noticed an increase in that since I've come back in the number, and that's just what's reported to us. And as with any community, there's a high level of under-reporting. So you'll see a focus in the plan around relationship safety presentations, and that's meant to be all ages. It's not something that we're focusing at the time only on schools and those that are new to dating. I think it's an important messaging piece, and often in these presentations or discussions that you have in groups within the community around these types of issues, just hearing that information will prompt them to either call about a friend or an associate that they've seen or somebody they're concerned about. And that's really the goal in doing it, as well as getting that information out. We may not get it out to the right person, but if we get it to somebody who's a bystander and sees that might be enough for them to at least make that call.
Thank you, and I mean, the 97%, that's unbelievable, so kudos to your department for that. I remember when I first got on council in 2005, we had a child and youth committee through council, and it was not the same one as like what you're sitting on, but it was like an Oak Bay Child and Youth Committee, and we had a police liaison officer that was with us on that. And so sometimes what would happen is presentations that were being made at the high school, for example, say on drug use or something like that, we would then in this chamber put on a presentation about what the kids had seen during the day at school for the adults, the parents, to come and see at nighttime. And it was really informative, and we usually got quite a good selection of people coming, and because their kids would come home from school saying, hey, we heard about this drug or whatever. And so then the parents would say, oh, well, that piques my interest. I want to find out what they were hearing about, or, about sexual assault or whatever it might happen to be. And so then we would have meetings in the hall and invite the parents to come. And so perhaps that's something that we can put on the table again at some point in the future.
Thank you. Corinne, and then Leslie.
Thank you. This is awkward. I can't look at you, but thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoyed reading through it in preparation for the meeting, and also impressed with the your response sample. 500 is quite I think a good level of engagement in terms of the industry, and so I'm as Hazel said, I'm really impressed with the 97%. I'm not surprised though, having lived here now almost 13 years. But what I wanted to ask you was, the focus is on safety, engagement, stewardship, and EDI. And when it comes to engagement, what are some of your most successful tools that you use to engage your community? Thank you.
Mark?
I think our people and the time that they take, whether that's walking down the street and spending time talking to somebody on the avenue, or just taking that extra time to dig a little bit deeper below the surface and not rush off from the call. And I say that having had a perfect example of it earlier this weekend, where we had an experienced member dealing with a suspicious person who was intuitive enough to take the time and realize that on the face of it there wasn't anything medical. However, the more he spent time with this person, something triggered him that this isn't quite right, and there's either, initially he thought a mental health issue, which it wasn't. Then he, after spending 5-10 more minutes than probably most people would spend at that call, he decided, I'm just going to call an ambulance. And it ended up being an aneurysm. But if he had just done the basic who, what, where, sign off, okay, everybody's safe, I'm going to leave now, that might not have got caught by the staff or by the individual he's dealing with. And that that incident in a little small piece of what we want our folks to do that are out there on the front lines dealing with this was a fantastic example. Now this is one of our experienced members that we hire on a as we need basis, special municipal constable. But what an example to set for everybody else around culture and expectations. And, you know, I read the file this morning. This member that wrote it up didn't know that that was the outcome. It's just, they wrote up the file, like, I just read the file, it's an excellent file. And then we find out a couple days later about what this really was. But it's so reflective of the approach that we expect them to take around engagement. And then a second example on a different level would be the work that we did with other police departments a couple of weeks ago on the gang issue, and having a community forum very similar to what you've described around, here's an issue we're seeing in the schools that's causing us some concern. We think that parents need to know more than what we can put out in a social media tweet or a quick article in the local newspaper, especially given the time of year. We're at the time of year or the end of school year, people are thinking more about their holidays than they're thinking about what's going on in the community or with youth. And it's very hard to get some traction on a message. So we put that, a group of the departments together, put out this opportunity for parents to come to a session with Safe Schools on what we're seeing in gang activity within some of our youth and community. And we had over 100 people show up at the end of June, which is shocking to get that level of uptake. So, I mean, we try to do both. I think there's going to be some challenges. Traditionally, we've been in the schools a lot in this community. It's been very effective for us, but that right now is being curtailed as a result of the school board trustee decision. So that'll be a challenge for us to figure out how do we engage with youth outside of that school environment. And I think the one benefit that comes with figuring out how to do that, and I've seen us do it in other communities, is by focusing outside the school, you hope to connect as well with those youth that aren't in school. And sometimes are at even a higher level of risk than those that are engaged in the school environment. So I would hope that by figuring out ways to do that, whether it's through some of the rec programs or the clubs that people are involved in, the youth will probably tell us how to do it.
Thank you so much.
I had Leslie. I was got hands popping up. I think. And then Esther, and did you have your? Okay.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to go back to the domestic violence thing and just understand it in the context of the survey as opposed to what you actually experience in terms of reported or investigated incidents or crimes or issues. Because it sounded to me like it was reported by respondents as their top third concern after road safety and theft. But then there were others. And I just wondered if there was any match. I mean, domestic violence is typically unseen, unheard. So I'm just curious as to why it was reported as a concern unless it mapped against something that you'd investigated. Like, it just seems really, I know that, I'm wondering because road safety and theft in our in social media, in all the reporting of what's going on in Oak Bay, that gets a lot of prominence. Those traffic incidents and theft, because they report how many were investigated, what happened, things reported stolen. But domestic violence, I can't ever think of that being reported as a crime stat in our community. I mean, and I know it happens everywhere. So I wonder if you have any hypothesis about what's driving that as a concern.
So you're right, we don't report about that a lot in the media, purposefully, unless it's a very significant case where obviously lots of people are aware and it draws a lot of attention on the street or something like that. We may put something in without identifying individuals, obviously, or an address, because our concern around being too public about it, if we're talking about specific incidents as opposed to the issue, is to deter others from reporting. If they think, you know, my family or my address or my street is going to show up in the Oak Bay News, and that's even more of a reason for me not to call. So we're very cognizant of being careful around that, as we are around mental health issues and reporting on the volume of those that we deal with and locations. It's because the media's always asking about where did this happen and age of people, et cetera. So we're cautious around that. Having said that, if it's a significant case or if we want to talk about the topic in general, we'll do that sometimes. There is no correlation between the reported. As I said, our reported domestic violence in this community is extremely low and has been historically. I haven't seen a big spike in reports over the past couple of years. COVID obviously created more strife and we saw some more conflict within families, and that's going in to help problem solve and resolve some of that, but not resolving physical domestic violence per se in those situations. And the policy around domestic violence is quite strict. There's pretty much always an arrest of some form if we have a case of that. There's obviously more of it out there than what we're hearing about, is my take on this. And whether that's from a bystander perspective and they're aware of it happening, or whether it's from actual victims. And then I also think that dating piece plays into it, and I'm hoping that there's more awareness around that domestic violence doesn't just pertain to two people that are married in a more formal relationship. It pertains to dating as well.
And sometimes children against parents or vice versa.
Oh, yes.
It's broad.
Yes, it's actually, that's a good point.
Esther, you?
Yes, thanks. Interesting statistics, and as many of you know, I am our liaison to the Victoria Family Court Youth Justice Committee. And so certainly when we talk about domestic violence, we know that during pandemic, all the resource agencies were reporting really significant increases in the number of cases. But interestingly enough, also, there seems to be a greater fear of lack of tolerance in more affluent neighborhoods to reporting of domestic violence, more apprehension by the people that are abused to report it, the stigma they feel, and also sometimes a more heightened feeling of being trapped in the situation that they're in. And there is also in Oak Bay quite a number of elderly people, and so sometimes just in the aging population, there is domestic violence associated with some of those things. So to put it into context, though, all of the agencies throughout the region were reporting much higher caseloads for domestic violence cases being reported.
Thanks, Esther. Carrie?
Thank you. I was really interested in addition to all the comments that have been said so far, just your comment about on the things to do, most youth being at the top, and your comment about youth will maybe tell us what to do. And I'm at the council level, we're also looking at how we can engage our youth to really be proactive about making them feel included in our community. And I don't know if you have any more specifics to share around some of the comments around youth and any ideas that have come up so far that maybe we could even collaborate with between council and police.
Mark?
I think we're still rebounding from this whole school liaison decision, because that really was our gateway into heavy engagement with youth and really hearing on a daily basis from them about what was going on in our pulse. On that piece, we've been fortunate here that we have had very solid, I would say for the past 10, 15 years, school liaison officers who wanted to do that job. It wasn't a, geez, who can we slot into there? And hopefully they'll survive the 2 years and not get eaten alive. We've had very, very strong school liaisons. Now that will help us as we try to navigate how do we engage with youth outside of that school environment, in that 3 of them, the past 3 we've had, are still with the department and have a lot of connection with youth that are still in the community and have come up through the school system. It is going to be tougher to figure out how we engage with those groups and who the leaders are within those groups in a more informal context, for lack of a better term. And I think through REC and some of the things that we do in other areas, that will be one way. I think a lot of it is going to come down to just, again, taking that time on the street when we see them and deal with them and encounter them either on calls or just in the community, and trying to find opportunities. And I'll rely heavily on our past school liaison officers for ideas on what they think will work and what those opportunities are in community. And probably rely somewhat on the school principals who we have a high level of support from. They'll have ideas of ways we can engage youth outside of the school environment. And I'm open to ideas on that.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, I just had one other question around when I was at the Pride Festival, there was a booth, Greater Victoria Police Diversity Task Force, and they mentioned that Oak Bay's a member, which was fantastic to hear. I wondered if you could just speak at all to any experiences you've had so far with them, or how you see them as a resource going forward.
Definitely. So the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Advisory Committee is made up of police representatives from each department, and then representatives from our diverse communities. Whether you're a representative from a diverse community or a police department member that's being presented as a potential community member, you go through a vetting process. And that's relatively new in the past couple of years. It used to be, oh, this police officer is in that section, therefore they're automatically on DAC. And that was on the DAC for 2 years recently. And we decided as a group that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted to make sure we had people who were interested in moving forward and progressing in that area and had a genuine interest in it. And we didn't feel it was fair that community members were going through a vetting process, which they had been for years, and the police officers weren't. So we made that change to it. We also went through a series about a year and a half, of community consultations with the different diverse communities through that committee. So there was a group of about 6 of us on the committee, a mix of someone from the Native Friendship Center. We had somebody from Vancouver Island Refugee Settlement, and then we had a couple of us as police officers, and we went around and met with these communities at night for a couple of hours each and worked into focus groups. We had Musa Magassa from UVic is the facilitator for the entire process, looking for input from them on how they felt we were doing as police departments in the region, working with their communities, suggestions they had on how we could do that better, or areas that they felt were priorities and what they felt were needs. And then lastly, any other input. And again, this was a bit pre-George Floyd and then around the same time. So it was an interesting time to be trying to do that work, but fascinating work to do, and just hearing from them about the importance of engagement with their youth. They were huge on that. The education pieces that they wanted was also interesting. They saw a lot of value in short presentations that some of the departments were doing at the time around law in Canada, particularly driving law. They felt that there was a real gap there, that they come in and they're into these situations and they don't know a lot about it, or the role of police in Canada. So they were very open to that. They felt that police needed to do more work meeting them in their community and at their events. It was really important to them. They didn't feel there was enough of that, and that was pretty consistent across all of the diverse communities we met with. Education was a big piece for them. You'll see some of that reflected in this plan as well, around the need for police to do more, not to take a 1-hour seminar, but to really invest some time and some effort into learning more about the history of police involvement with some of their communities, and to understand how long that road is to build up that trust. And the mayor spoke about trust at the start, and that really being a key part of being an effective police service, no matter what size of community you're working in, and how fragile that trust can be. And what the other piece was around how what happens somewhere else matters here. So you may have your community and working really well in your community, and everything's going great, and something goes sideways in another province, in another country, and how that can affect trust in police here. And something that all of us have learned over the years and know, but boy, did they ever reinforce it with us. And how difficult that can be, and how fragile that trust is, and you just need to not take it for granted, I think was the biggest message that came out. And then the last message was just their willingness to work with us, but wanting to know that we're listening. So they saw a lot of value in the process we went through with that. So there was a report that's public that came out as a result of that Dr. Magassa prepared, and a series of objectives that police departments have committed to following through on, both around education and engagement. So we have a representative that attends monthly meetings and then is at the activities, was at the Pride Parade with Chief DAC yesterday.
Thanks. Andrew, do you have anything else you want to add in here at this point? No pressure, just okay. Go ahead, Hazel, for again.
Actually, Mike, you've basically answered my question. My question was, I wanted you to chat about the effect of the not having the school liaison officer anymore, which I think all came as a huge surprise to us. So I think you've touched on that, but if you have anything else to say, yeah, touch more. Because it's
Happy to
something,
go there.
it's something that I think that we as a council really have to put our heads behind as well, and I don't know.
Sure. Do you want me to just touch a little bit on our discussion as a board?
Sure, and then I'll go after that.
And other people can jump in here, because I think we've had this as a discussion point around our table. We are looking at some mechanisms of speaking as a board. So I have a role, obviously, as chair of being the spokesperson, but we haven't had any kind of formal piece other than to when we found out that this was going to be a discussion at the school board. We did put together a pretty considerable letter asking them. The request of our board was that we recognize that there was benefit in examining the role of the school liaison officer, how it could better meet the needs of the 21st century and address any of the concerns that were being raised. Most of the concerns raised were based off of fairly flawed studies based out of the US, and so we tried to sort of point that out without delving into the great details of it all. And I really appreciated Heather actually did the presentation to the board, but it was not much of a debate as it came through because the overwhelming ask of the community was to keep it, and the debate was essentially non-existent. They just had to vote and voted to end it. So I think we'd still like to be advocates for a future, whatever that looks like. Ideally, that future which could continue the role in some way. One of the harsh realities of, as we know from our budget questions is money's short, resources are short, and so the Oak Bay Police Department we're maintaining, we're calling it a community liaison officer. So that person who's got the school liaison officer will maintain a lot of those duties just to sort of look for ways of carrying on that very important work. We don't know exactly what that looks like. Pretty much every other department has essentially said, we're short 8 officers anyway, so we'll take the 2 or 3 school liaison officers that we have and just reassign them. So getting them back again is going to be quite difficult because it means sort of adding another line item in a budget probably to add a new position in future. So that's the danger here, is that we don't have that ability. And then I'm going to come back to you, Esther, but I'm just going to let Mark kind of give sort of a highlight of impacts and so forth of the school liaison
The board
officer.
has been heavily engaged, more than any of the other boards in the region around this issue, right from early stages once we brought it to their attention, which I know our department and our member that was in the school liaison position really appreciate. I think we're just starting to see the impacts, and we're trying to navigate and figure out what those impacts, I will say, are much more far-reaching than what we anticipated. Initially, I thought it was simply, okay, you're not allowed to have a school liaison officer anymore in the schools. We'll navigate around that and figure out how we do it. I've since learned that, at least at this stage, includes not doing presentations in classrooms. Aside from, we had other officers that necessarily weren't school liaison that may go in an area of expertise and do a presentation on something of interest. I know they're in discussions to decide what that actually looks like moving forward into the new school year, and we haven't received anything formally in writing from the district around that. But the sense I'm getting over the past month is this is much farther reaching than simply the school liaison officer position. It's much more about police and schools in general, which I think is unfortunate. There's so much more that we get from that position aside from having an officer there and engaged with youth. We're able to engage on challenges or issues that we're aware of in the community that we may have attended outside of school hours, where somebody needs some support, either through domestic violence is a great example of something like that, or there may be a mental health issue in the home that we're attending and seeing the impact it has on the youth, and maybe it's a chance for that officer to engage and provide a little different level of support otherwise. And then secondly, getting feedback through that officer and their level of awareness and engagement around things we could be doing in the community to either do a better job with youth or deal with the situation that they're seeing starting at a very low level and what they're hearing, and then we get engaged, obviously, in a different perspective from the department through information they're able to share with us. So I think we'll continue to see the impacts of that. I think we're underestimating the impacts, to be totally frank and honest. And it's as frustrating as it is. I think we've done a good job in making our thoughts and our voice heard around the value of that position in the schools. And I was very happy to see the board support the fact that we maintain someone in that community liaison, youth liaison type role, even if it's not a school liaison role, because I think there's work that can be done. I've seen it done elsewhere in working with some of the higher risk youth that we engage with regularly, and I think that's some of the tact we'll take with that at the outset and look for those opportunities and have the ability to be somewhat nimble in that. But it's really hard, as the mayor referenced, particularly in this current policing environment around resourcing, and we're seeing it across all industries, not just policing, individuals, but shortages with HR. And it's very tough if somebody comes back to you a year later and says, okay, we would like to turn the tap back on that service we used to have. Meanwhile, you've adjusted your resourcing footprint and your operational footprint to deal with another pressure because that body's not available. So we wanted to try and draw a fence around that a little bit, at least in the short term, to be able to still have that level of service within the community and then see where it goes as far as decisions.
I'm really glad to hear that, and I think that, I know that the province is able to step in when there's other things to do with policing and other decisions that are made, and I'm wondering whether the province will take a look at this and perhaps want to step in and make their thoughts known around this as well. I'm not sure, but
That's a question for them. My enlightened observation would be no. They're not gonna, this is a controversial thing that they don't want to necessarily get involved in. I think they've got enough to worry about with Surrey and other places that they're caught up in. Before I go to Esther and Karina, just Heather, did you want to add anything to this? Because you've been quite involved in this and helping draft letters and in order to the conversation. So anything else that you think you want to add?
Yeah, sure. Maybe just a couple of quick points. First off, I should say I'm a lawyer working for the Ministry of Attorney General for the province. I'm not speaking for the province at all in this capacity, but speaking as a member of the police board. As Kevin said, we did draft a letter. It's on our police board website. If you want to check it out, then I think it lays out, kind of our position and our view of what we see as the role and the value, as well as kind of our recommended approach for what we would have liked to have seen the school board do. And coming back to the question of might the province do something, again, not speaking for the province, but the resolutions, there was a series of, I think, 3 resolutions that the school board passed, which had the, end result of ending the school liaison officer program. But they did also call on the province, and I think it was the Minister of Education and the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General to look at providing some of the services or roles or functions that that school liaison officers did provide previously. We, in our letter, took the position that the program should be continued while further research is undertaken to evaluate an appropriate role or potential modifications to the role. But anyhow, so just to say, perhaps we might hear something from the province, but But yeah, it's something that I think was important to all board members, including myself, and I was happy to take the lead on the letter and the ultimately ill-fated presentation, and we are definitely considering how we might continue to have some sort of advocacy or role in promoting that program or the components of it that we see as providing value, which is also referenced in a different way, but still captured in terms of engagement in the strategic plan that you've got in front of you tonight.
The draft strategic plan, in fact, had to be changed slightly because it actually had quite a bit of focus on the school liaison officer program as a key piece of the operational implementation. Sorry, I thought I'd let those answers happen and then go to the council questions, and then have Esther and then Corinne.
Yeah, and SPLOs have been a subject of heavy discussion at Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice, both pro and con. Our committee really has to have a non-biased approach to how we view the matters. So we also look at the correspondence from the Attorney General's office and from the Human Rights Commission, and listen to some of the cases that propelled some of this forward. And we have School Board 61, 62, and 63 represented. The only one that hasn't been at the meetings to speak yet is the affected school district, so that makes it a little more awkward. But certainly there was many positive feedback comments that we got from those in other communities. Certainly echoed the sentiments that we've heard around this table, where it's so easy to cut budgets and it can be so difficult to get them reinstated. We also recognize and in fact, we've all been listening to a variety of all of the discussions that have taken place. So I certainly heard Ms. Cochran's very articulate presentation to the school district, as were all of the speakers that presented. And we recognize that some of the advice that has been given and the path that the school district is on really presents for them an enormous task to figure out where they go from here in rebuilding it. And so that's and they're not heavy on resources either. So we have a lot of questions. We've also done reach outs and hope to bring into the next meetings some of the Indigenous or Métis community members that may have, again, good and positive or negative comments, and just hear from them so that we can form some opinion on the matter and also give input. But one thing we did notice, and which I certainly understand, is the lack of funding for youth justice in the province of BC, and so that is also part of the underlying problem, and something that our committee is looking at and trying to gauge more of the resources that are out there, and because certainly the funding model in this province is quite different in some of the other provinces. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Esther. It's a great perspective. Corinne?
This is so awkward. Just a couple of questions and some ideas. Having formerly been a probation officer in this region many years ago, when the emphasis was on diversion and rehabilitation for youth in particular, and we all know that the earlier you reach a youth, the more unlikely that he or she or they will hit the adult system. So I guess my question is, one, how much collaboration do you have with the Solicitor General's personnel? So that would be probation and corrections. That's one. And then secondly, I don't know, I guess maybe it's my stage in life. I'm getting braver about being a stronger advocate for something. But if you could solicit support from other correctional personnel, probation, and so on, people at the ground level, because it's the people in the field who really understand the issue. And with all due respect to the education ministry and the school district here, you really don't have a full understanding unless you're working right on the ground in the area of criminal justice particularly. So maybe advocating through some supporters around people that you work with on a daily basis, people that are also involved in youth justice. And so that's just a couple of ideas. But many years ago, we had integrated resource teams, and they were terrific. So they were social workers, police, probation, parole, health, and they worked on a community basis, and it was really successful, along with the court system. So you might be able to advocate at different levels and in different ways, as opposed to just working with the school district or the school board.
Thanks, Corinne. Leslie, you wanted to?
Maybe Mark would like to say something on that.
No, go ahead, Mark.
So we do have a fair amount of integration with probation, although it's limited how many youth in this community are on probation. As you know, in youth in general, it's quite limited, but particularly in this community. But those that we do, and we have an active case right now, we actually deal with them quite a bit. So those relationships are there between the officers and obviously the managers within. There has been new provincial funding that came out around significant violent offenders, REVOI project, based on the prolific offender project that we did about 15 years ago in the province, that was well founded in research, did quite well, and then funding wasn't continued as other priorities came up. So they've renamed it, brought in a similar program, and they're looking for representation from all communities. So it's not only focused on the highest level offenders in the region. If you have a high level offender that maybe isn't quite the same level as those that are coming from larger communities, you can still have a seat at that table. And perhaps yours gets that same enhanced wraparound service from these different agencies. So that has just started up in the last month and a half. Getting all of those partners at the table and talking. Obviously, they're talking about the violent offender in this situation, in case managing it. But as you build those relationships at that table, that parlays into other discussions you can have in supportive work. So I think it's really about building the relationships amongst those justice partners and keeping that going so that you can parlay it into other discussions. Like you were asking.
So that's hopeful.
Yeah, I think I'm going to just hand it over to Christine as well. I'm feeling going to talk about the school to prison pipeline. That
No,
was so,
I'm
no,
not,
you're not.
actually.
Okay.
Surprisingly, but
Let me
I
move it a little
could.
closer to you just so it picks you up a bit clearer.
Oh, that's okay. There, look at that.
That's
Mobile.
good.
Just one point of clarification. Oak Bay Police certainly know this, but it's a common misconception that child youth mental health for the island is a health authority responsibility. It is not. The Ministry of Child and Family Development owns all community child youth mental health, and that is a very constrained organization. They function in a crisis space right now, and it's a very interesting consideration when the commissioner, the Human Rights Commissioner decreed that police agencies would have to demonstrate why a civilian or other agency could not step into the space. That consideration, everybody said, well, the health authority will do it. And the health authority, I'm not speaking for the health authority, let's just be very clear. My role is on the police board, but it is not the purview of the health authority to manage community child youth mental health. It's all MCFD. An admitted child is a different question, but community resourcing comes from the province, not from the health authority, and that's across the island. And in fact, across the province.
It is a huge constraint.
Huge.
And I will say too, because to the point that Mark made, not having a lot of interactions there, some of the examples cited in that report talking about this school to prison pipeline model, it doesn't really exist that way in Canada. Like there's not a place for arrests and to get them into the criminal justice system. In fact, the entire focus is the exact opposite, is to intercede and provide education to prevent that from happening. So anyway, go ahead, Leslie.
Yes, thank you. All very interesting. Lots of food for thought. I just wanted to follow up with a question about liaison officers and historically the private schools in our surrounding communities, because that's another school group that would still have needs. And then what happens to the liaison role if, I don't know, proportionally more of it was in public schools, but you still want to continue that service? So if you just could comment on those relationships.
So we're continuing the relationship in the SLO role with the private schools, and they've been supportive of that. And to the credit of the last couple of SLOs that we've had, have become even more engaged than what I remember SLOs being when I was here previously as chief, which is, again, to their credit, they've built those relationships and made those inroads with the private school where they see value in having them in there. The advantage that I've seen in the last year with the private schools is if they don't want us there for something, they're very clear about that, which is great. It's great communication in that relationship that they feel comfortable being clear about, you know what, we'd kind of like you here in this role today, or we have this going on, can you fill that role in this way to help us out? Which I find quite helpful, and again, that engages us with another component of the community and youth, and I see that continuing. The other advantage around the person that we have sliding into this community liaison role is the same person who was in the SL role. So she has those relationships established with those schools and with the administrators, and that trust built, that it's a pretty smooth transition to do that and now move into a little more community role to make up for that gap of not being in the schools directly.
And I just a comment, it helps because it keeps you engaged about the things that are affecting youth, because private school versus public school, lots of the same stuff is still coming their way in terms of the things they're troubled by or drawn towards or pushed away from or whatever. There's a whole raft of issues. They're mimicked in both places, but it's just the number of students is not as many. So anyway, thank you.
I'm going to go to Hazel, and I thought it might be worthwhile just looking at time, and I wrap up at 6:30 at the latest. So it may be worth just stepping through the four sort of the key pages of this. So if there's any specific questions or anybody from the police board wishes to comment on anything here specifically, we can do that. But go ahead, Hazel.
Just really quickly, Chief, on the private schools, etc. Do you do? How young do you go? Like, do you go to St. Christopher's? Do you go to other? My thought would be that if we're not able to get the public school at grade kindergarten to grade whatever, grade 12, then are we getting in at an earlier age? So St. Christopher's and at even own Parks and Rec that have kids in a younger age group.
Mark?
Traditionally, we have based on a request basis. If they ask us, can you come talk about Halloween safety or bike safety? Those are the two that would be more targeted towards that. A little bit on stranger safety, maybe, depending on the group or what issues are present in the community at the time. Often there'll be an issue happen in our community or somewhere else in the CRD that highlights an issue that, we could really use a quick talk on that. Or they see an issue, let's use theft as an example. So that age of kids and stealing becomes an issue, and they want to deal with it at a very early stage intervention and do a bit of education without identifying the individual. We may go in and give a talk on theft and what the potential consequences are and why it's a bad thing. And so we do take those opportunities when called to do them. But have we had an officer actually assigned to those schools? No, not in the past, but definitely open to doing work in that area and have in the past when asked.
Deer safety talks. Okay. Deer safety. So, Mark, do you want to just, and I think we'll just sort of touch on them a little, we don't have to walk through them because I think everybody's had a chance to read them, but the sort of 4 pages starting on page 11 of 17, it says safety, engagement, equity, diversity, inclusion, and stewardship, and then some of the ways that we're measuring that. Council is excellent at reading through all these things. I know that they've already had a chance to go through it, but maybe just quickly, we can just touch, maybe make a couple of highlights if there's any questions, or if the board wants to add anything to some of the context of some of these, I think it may be helpful as well. And by the way, this is the first time we've ever done a joint meeting, so we're kind of learning on the fly as to what works and what doesn't. So don't be shy about just jumping in and saying stuff, because there's definitely a learning curve here for everybody. Mark?
So on the safety category, focusing on property crime, decreasing injury due to road accidents. So that was really a key piece around injury. We saw an increasing piece around injury and road accidents, and that includes, we're seeing obviously our community has a high level of active transportation and interest in active transportation. So we're starting to see more volume in those areas, and as a result, more conflict amongst some road users at times, and accidents, in particular earlier this year in regards to cyclists, and late last year. So you start looking at trends, even though our numbers are smaller, and seeing trends in some of these around injury, accidents, and inattentiveness in driving. So you'll see the focus in the middle of that page around that, both from an education perspective around bike trains and bike safety. We do it with youth right now, but we wouldn't be against doing it for adults as well, around a bike safety seminar or rodeo of some sort, to talk about different things they can do to be visible and be predictable when operating a cycle, which are two key points. More importantly, the enforcement piece is predominantly aimed at drivers that aren't paying attention or aren't giving the space they should to cyclists and other active transportation users in the community. Speed continues to be an issue, particularly up by the university in Fall Bay and Cedar Hill Cross. It's amazing the speeds we get people at. And then the education piece there around that I talked about earlier with new drivers and traffic laws. In property crime, focusing both on crime prevention and education, but increased patrols on bikes and training. We've had a big turnover in officers. So in the past, we're pretty close to having everybody trained on bikes. Not the case anymore, so we've got some work to do there and getting more officers trained on that so they can be out on the bikes both in uniform and maybe in plain clothes if there's something specific we're targeting in that respect. And then also trying to increase referrals to restorative justice. So not everybody's going through the court system at an early stage, and restorative justice has great impacts and from a lasting and recidivism reduction perspective. Historically, we have pretty low numbers of referrals that we've had of cases that they're appropriate to send to restorative justice, but they've also expanded some of the things they're including, and that they'll accept referrals on. So looking to use that more and build more awareness amongst our officers on that. I think we've talked about the relationship violence piece quite a bit, so I'll go to the next slide on engagement.
Just before we move on, is there any other questions or anything people want to touch on in this section? Go ahead.
Just as far as the bike safety goes, because there's no school liaison officer, are you still able to go in and do bike safety with the schools? Will they allow that? Because I know that was something big that.
Right now,
that
no.
is so
But
sad.
I think the way we try to get around that is we either do an evening session or something on a weekend. And have it, I've seen that done elsewhere where you have it open to, as long as they're pre-registered, we have a sense of numbers that are coming in, but yeah, historically we've done it at all the elementary and middle schools in the past, but.
We could use the rec center as a focal point.
But that'll be a way around it to try and offer it and see what uptake we get. So a similar program, but not tied to the schools per se.
I just want to point out too, there's a note here about the Trauma-Informed Foundations course, but one of the things that I saw really positive in the last couple of years, 2-3 years, has been just the awareness at the police leadership and sworn officer levels of just how important that is. So changes made internally. So in the rooms that the public come into, they've been softened and made much more like just friendly spaces as opposed to sort of a harsh interrogation room feel. And there's a lot of things there, a lot of work going on to make sure that. Because obviously people are often at the most vulnerable when they're dealing with the police and sort of working on ways. And it's been, for me, the education has come from the police up as I've seen it. And it's been really impressive to see how all the officers, maybe not all, I don't know them all, but how it's come from the policing themselves to be aware of this and the need to make sure that, again, that building that trust side of the equation.
And we've trained some of our own people to teach the fair and impartial policing course. So the deputy is an instructor in that. We just sent another person to the Justice Institute, one of our acting sergeants. So they'll actually be teaching it to our members as opposed to bringing somebody else in to teach that, which I think is important in, again, building that culture within the organization and also opportunities for others to get a chance to instruct in some of these areas rather than always relying on others to come in and teach.
Okay. Why don't we go on to the next slide, then engagement.
Engagement, coffee with the cop is something we've been doing a bit. Having an officer, she has done a couple at Monterey Center. There was one at the International School on Balbay Road, Henderson. We're looking to do more of that this year and switch up who's at them, have some of the leadership present and advertise them a little more. It's been limited, the uptake of people that show up for it, but again, having it out there and that opportunity for them to come and have more of an informal visit with a police officer, I think is a good way to build trust and an opportunity for them to ask questions they might not want to ask in a larger group setting if they show up something of that nature. Looking to have a better inventory of mental health resources and share proactively with people in crisis, so that right now is quite reliant on the officer that shows up at that call. And we've had a lot of people come in from out of province recently that we've hired that wouldn't be aware as somebody that spent their entire policing career in the CRD or BC, and it's much higher level of awareness of what services are available here. So to have a consistent package, be it in a card or something we can refer them to online on one of our websites that would direct them to that resource inventory, I think would be useful both for the people we're dealing with in crisis and also for our members. We're talking about creating a welcome wall, which would simply be the welcoming words in a variety of different languages somewhere near our entrance of our department to make it more welcoming for the changes in diversity we're seeing in our community and the people that show up at our front counter. We're going to continue to participate in the Greater Victoria Youth Police Camp. We just started that again this year with the other police departments, and was a great success. There's a police foundation that's been created for Greater Victoria. With some community members, some of them are from Oak Bay, that have provided the funding for that camp and are huge supporters of it. So we would like to see that continue, and we have an active role in that, both in instructing at the camp and being there as sort of a camp counselor per se. Equity, diversion, and inclusion.
Before you go to
Oh,
that,
sorry.
can I just, I'm going to put a little plug in there because I think we were having the same conversation about the difficulty of the myriad of services at the Alliance to End Homelessness, and the sort of the difficulty of getting people put into the right place at the right time. And as well, it's a little uneven at times. The BC 211 is a really good service. Like, it's just having that number to call and just ask is that even they struggle to keep up with what's going on. But I always sort of try and remind everybody, all members of council and everybody else, that if that's you were right, you were United Way when that was in, but that's such a great tool to be able to say, if nothing else, if you have no other knowledge, make sure they call BC 211 and just ask, because they can often get put into the right places through that service.
Thanks for that plug, Ken.
Yeah, hey, I'm here for you. Sorry, go on, Mark.
The other piece I'll talk about very briefly on engagement is around the work we're doing on leadership training for sergeants. So we have a relatively new core of sergeants with limited experience in leadership roles. They're good people. They are doing a great job in the role, but they haven't had the advantage of working in some of them in a leadership role in larger organizations. This is their first kick at the cat at doing that, and with it comes, they don't get the same volume of calls or experience that you may get in a large department where you learn those lessons a lot quicker. So we see a gap there, a need to spend some time and energy and money on providing them some of the training opportunities that they would likely get in a larger organization, and also to try and build that leadership cadre within the department. So you're not always looking to go outside when you're hiring executives in the department. So there's been a lot of interest in that. The other piece to that, which comes at no cost, but we've seen huge value in, is having them play a more active role in the budget preparation and discussions to understand how that works. And that has been a light come on moment for some of them. There's a few that still struggle with it from time to time, but we'll continue working on that. And we see huge value in that, and just giving them a more global corporate perspective of what goes on behind the scenes from a budget and accountability perspective with the department. So they had a key role in it last year that they hadn't had in the past, and we'll continue to build on that.
There's been a good attendance from union leadership at the board meetings as well, which has been very nice to see. And I should just point out as well, so BC is actually quite unique in Canada in that the province does really provide better support to the police boards than most provinces do in terms of providing training. And so previously, Wendy and I both attended through the Rotman School of Business at University of Toronto. It's a police board specific Institute of Corporate Directors certification process, which is excellent. And now they've hired Watson, and I know a number of us also worked with them in their developing of that curriculum, but that curriculum is rolled out. I think, Heather, are you the only one here you've done? And Andrew's done it, right? Oh, no, you've done, okay. And I'm doing it in the fall, so it's very extensive, and it's actually really, I wish they could make it available for all boards. It's quite intensive, but it's really a good baseline of all things, reading financial statements, core governance, best practices, et cetera. Christine?
I just wanted to comment on that. A couple of years ago, I did my board director's certification through McMaster, which is a year-long grind. And I wasn't expecting the Watson course to compare, and it's fantastic. So it's $20,000 cheaper, and I'll just throw it. And it just really it's very specific to police board function, but has all of the important it really is exceptional, and I couldn't recommend it enough, honestly.
Thank you. Okay, sorry to go on that a little bit, but I think it's just good to know that there's also some nice resources. I think giving kudos to the province when they do things well. This is one they've done really well. They've actually provided the resources to police boards to help do a good job. Mark?
So in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion, this was informed both by input from the board and a lot of what we heard in those consultations that I referenced earlier through the Police Diversity Committee and the events we held across the region in that front. So all officers to complete that fair and impartial policing course that I spoke about, the board also having some training that they will receive. We're going to have another look at our recruitment policy and our process as we put people through the steps as we look at selecting new members of the department. We had a look at it last year. We had actually one of our diverse members look at it and give us feedback on it if he saw any issues with it. He didn't at the time, but I don't think it hurts to have another look at that. Ideally to remove any barriers that may be there that I don't see through my lens or the deputy doesn't see through hers. And I think it's always good to have somebody that may have a different experience than us have a look at that and provide input or suggestions of changes that may be appropriate. We'll also look at other policies through that lens, and that'll be more of a work in progress, but the recruitment one I think is the most important one to get out the door first on that front. Also, I think there's lots of opportunity and work we can do to both learn more about our local Indigenous history and culture. I would say that the knowledge around that within the department is quite low at this point in time, as it pertains to the local history. So trying to do some work and see if we can have an elder come in and provide some learning for all of us in that regard. I think there'd be huge value in. And it's also part of a provincial policing standard that has come in, that there's an expectation that each police department within the province, the municipal departments, engage in some sort of a training session around local Indigenous culture for all of their employees. So that's in reference to that as well. It addresses that need within it.
Mark, I might just suggest, since we now have a reconciliation guide from Songhees that helps us with these pieces, that perhaps maybe it's worth having a joint meeting at some point with you and Selena and that individual, and you can maybe just talk at a high level about ways that might be implemented over the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Anything else from anybody on that item? And then we have stewardship.
So stewardship, you'll see the piece here at the top around the board and some of the work they're going to do on the stewardship piece in updating some of their policies and ensuring that it meets or exceeds provincial guidelines. We're going to develop within the department an operational plan specific to the strategic plan that we'll report on quarterly to the board on our progress on the different objectives that are identified within the plan. As well, a financial management budget education session for all of the sergeants prior to us preparing this year's budget, and Christopher Payne from municipalities offered to help us with that. And he's one of the few people I've met that can explain that type of thing in layman's terms and do a great job of it. No,
It's true.
he does a fantastic job of it, so I think that will be very well received by our sergeants. As well, we will do an annual report that'll be public. It'll be to the police board, but it'll also be on the website, that will include disaggregated race-based data on our arrests and criminal charges of people from diverse groups. We did that last year. We didn't make it public, but we did have a reporting to the board on that last year. You'll see some of the training to try and employee wellness and resilience is a very topical piece in lots of workplaces, but particularly in first responder workplaces right now, around keeping our people well and at work. So you'll see some resiliency training. That was a big thing that I wanted us to focus on, and I heard the value of it from some of the members that have already attended that training. We can talk about wellness all we want, but if we're not resilient, there's limited value in continuing to send people on wellness training if we don't have that resiliency piece in place and some tools to deal with a lot of the things that they see and deal with on a daily basis. So we'll continue to work on that. The other piece around exempt member, so we hire predominantly people that have previous policing experience to come into our department. And in the past, a lot of them have been from British Columbia, and only recently we've been hiring people, a fair number of people from Ontario. And they came to us with a concern around what our orientation process is for members that come in from out of province with significant policing experience, but they don't maybe know all of the local protocols, services that are available, The law piece we cover off relatively well, but they saw some gaps in that. A couple of them had a training background and took the ball and ran with it and developed quite a strong orientation program that they brought to us for approval, and it's fantastic, and we've now used that with our last couple of hires. So again, a gap that we knew was there a bit, but didn't realize the level of it, and to have a couple of quite strong operational police officers come to you and tell you there's a gap there, and that they have a solution, I think is great. So that's found its way into here as well. We don't have any fitness equipment at the department at all. And I think when we talk about wellness and we talk about resiliency, I think there'd be some value in that. We have very limited space, but I think there's something we could do on that front that would help. And if you keep people fit and healthy, that is more likely to keep them well in other areas of their life. So that's some of the rationale behind that, and we'll obviously address that in future budgets. And then thinking innovation, and as you know, we have the commitment to transition fully to electric vehicles within our fleet. We've been doing that. We just purchased a second one actually this morning. We picked it up. It's not all kitted out yet in the kit that it needs, but it's on site, so we're waiting another 5 or 6 weeks to get that kit. That has been a learning process because we're at the front of the pack on this. And there's limited options in vehicles, and then there's all the challenges of finding the equipment you need to make it a police vehicle and make it safe and functional. So we're learning a lot, and other departments are actually calling us about what we're learning as we work through those challenges and do that transition.
Mark, I'm going to just stop you there. There's a couple of questions. It's cognizant of time. I want to make sure we have enough of a break between this meeting and the next, and this. I think people outside that probably may still be there.
Just a quick question on the fitness aspect. Does the number one, do all the police officers get a membership to the rec center?
Yes.
But you're looking for something in-house?
In-house. The challenge with the rec center is a great benefit.
Yeah.
The challenge is they can't, given the nature of our work,
Yes.
you can't go to the rec center and drop your gun off and
Right.
start working out and then be ready to go to a call.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have something, and you wouldn't have equipment near to the same, we have very limited space, so the equipment wouldn't be extensive. But that's a little easier to do, to drop your gun belt on the floor in a closed, secure police station and do something fitness related, and then get it back on and roll quickly.
Would it be something that you would do in conjunction with the fire department? Because I know the fire department uses the rec center a lot as well. So is there a capacity to be able to kind of share fitness equipment, I guess, is what it would be?
Possibly, and some of our members do go over there and use that, and others, given where it's at in the fire hall, in the basement, and some of our female members are a little more concerned about doing that, not by a lack of cooperation or anything of that nature. It's just, it's been raised to me by a few employees enough that it's twigged, okay, I need to pay attention to that and listen to that. And that's part of what this is about.
Okay, thank you.
Plus, they probably don't have heavy enough weights for all the police officers.
You tell the fire
I won't go
department
there.
that.
Too many mirrors.
Corinne?
Yeah, I was interested in the wording in the last bullet and the brackets at the end on the
Okay,
dating.
yeah.
Could you, I mean, I know dating's complicated, we've all been there, but I was just curious to know what the flavor of that bullet was and the intent there.
So a lot of it will be around online dating and the risks attached to it. And we also wanted to put it in such a way that you capture a broader audience. If you talk about relationship safety, well, that means different things to different people, as opposed to, we want to be able to take that on the road and go to talk to a youth about it, but also to be able to walk into some of our care homes and talk there about the same topic. Maybe aren't it a little different, but it's the same concepts that we're talking about. And we're seeing incidents of very similar behaviors at different age groups in the community. So to find something that's opening and non-threatening, and an acknowledgement right off the bat that this is complicated no matter what age you are in this day and age.
Yeah. No, that's good. And thank you for that. And my other question was answered. I had the same idea that Hazel had about the rec center, using that as a resource. Yeah.
Thank you. Just looking around at the police board members, we've been taking questions, and Mark's been answering the questions mostly here. Is there anything people want? Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
I think one area that it's an issue and it's a concerning issue, and that's in regards to recruitment and retention. And directly related to recruitment and retention is housing and the affordability issue. And it's not hitting Oak Bay, it's hitting every department in the province. I attended the police board conference in Nelson this year, and I mean, it is a major issue, but certainly in the CRD, affordability is, it hasn't diminished. It's gotten more concerning. So workforce housing is becoming an issue that's being discussed similarly to what was discussed in U.S. cities 15 to 20 years ago about, you've got teachers and nurses and doctors not being able to come into communities because they can't afford it. Well, it's police officers as well. So just beware of that in terms of what we're looking at. And we've just begun to have a discussion about that. What does that mean for us? And what's that going to mean for other police departments? I mean, you can see what Victoria has done. They've, big ads on the side of their building and, constantly promoting themselves.
It's a point for municipal employment as well as that. And in fact, we've lost at least one, I think, good applicant that wanted to come out and looked at the total cost of living here and decided it wasn't worth to move to the province after all. So it's a big issue. Thanks, Wendy. I'm just going to go to council, other members of the board. If anybody else wanted to add anything here as we kind of wrapping up. Nope. Andrew, anything?
No, it was very interesting listening to the questions and the responses. Thank you.
Thanks. One thing I will say, having worked with all of you quite closely, very different, ideas on how to do things and everything else is absolute perfect alignment. In everybody around this table is looking to how to make this community better, how to find ways of making things sort of work, having frank discussions about how to get there, all those kind of positive things that make boards and councils work well. So it's very nice to have this little venue to have a bit of a sharing of where the police board's been working at to kind of move things forward. And Esther, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just a follow-up question to the comment on housing issues and recruitment and whatnot. Just if you could enlighten us into perhaps of within this district or the greater region, what are the demographics of the officers that we have, and what does succession planning look like?
Mark?
That's a good one.
The demographics have gotten younger than I would say we were 5 years ago, definitely than we were 10 years ago, and more diverse from a male-female demographic. Diversity amongst diverse communities and diverse community applicants is a struggle. It's a big struggle for us. We have a volunteer reserve constable from a diverse community who's 22, who just joined us a couple weeks ago, which is fantastic, who's interested in a career in policing, so that's encouraging to see. And I think because we hire exempt officers, we're hiring from a pool that 15 years ago wasn't very diverse. So that's a challenge that will have to work its way through a bit, is one challenge. When we look at hiring younger officers, we had a fantastic applicant from a diverse community, but the housing issue. We got almost to the last stage of the process, and she finally took a more serious look at what it was going to cost to live here and just couldn't do it. And I get it. It's frustrating. It's difficult for them to come here. So we'll continue to work through that. The other challenge is just policing is a tough career to attract people to right now, and we're seeing it firsthand. We lost 5 people in the last year, 1 to retirement, but 3 of them left policing entirely. Like, we're not talking about in the past where somebody goes to a larger department because it's exciting or there's greater career opportunities or something of that nature at the stage of their career, which has happened in the past with young members in this department. They see something sexier next door and decide they want to give that a try, and that's understandable. certain stage of their careers. But that wasn't the case in this. We had 3 younger officers, good officers, who decided that policing was not for them anymore at a very early stage of their career and took jobs in other sectors with significant pay and benefit cuts. Because that's where they were at in life and making that decision. And you're seeing it in other sectors too, but you didn't see it very often in policing where they actually left the career entirely, particularly in the CRD. But we're seeing it, some of the other departments are starting to see it. So it's a concern. I mean, luckily we've been able to hire and fill those vacancies, but it's a challenge and tough to plan for.
It is something we talk about quite a lot at the board, is at the table as well, is how do we create an environment in our workforce that is attractive, can retain people, creates the right balance of challenges and interests and so forth. I do want to give kudos to the leadership here as well, though, about just making a conscious effort to make sure that, at least on a gender perspective, it's a very balanced force, and having that diversity, I think, has really been paid off in huge dividends to the force. And I think that feeling safe and the trust part of it becomes a lot of it when people see the police force reflecting the same sort of makeup as we have in the community. Green?
Is there a mandatory retirement age for police as there is with fire? Thank you.
Mark?
Yes, there is the age of 60 in collective agreement.
I'm not wanting to put you on the spot. Is that a barrier in any way to succession planning or recruitment, do you feel? Or so age limitations are not very common in the workforce, but they are common in fire, police, and judging, actually. But it's 75, not 60. So I just wondered if, yeah, Fred's way over that. But I was just wondering if that is perceived as any sort of a problem. Thank you.
I think one thing we have here that's a bit unique is we have the Special Municipal Constable program that we brought in a couple years ago that allows us to hire retired officers. And they still have to leave at 60, but it gives them an opportunity to get out of a full-time policing career earlier in their service. And if they still want to stay with a foot in policing, can join this program with us and do it on an on-call basis. And when I talk about the value that we've had 2 people do it so far, and the value that they bring in passing on that experience that they've gained over those years, and they're coming in, they can say no to any shift. So when they come in, they're happy to be there. And that shows, and that impacts other members that they're working with.
We can't do that.
And they're able to take that experience, and they're in a different position, and like they're happy to share it. And the mentoring and the experience that they bring to the table, both in how they deal with the community and what they're able to pass on to our members, has shown great benefits in that program. So that allows us to address that issue a little bit and bring in some more experienced members and still leverage their experience and their background in policing.
Thank you so much. So we've been here for an hour and 40 minutes. We've got another lengthy meeting starting at 7, so I think we should probably wrap this one up. Been very interesting, and thanks for the piece of it. And if there's any thoughts that people have, having gone through this, that you want to share, you can just maybe send them to Mark as probably best, and we can maybe try and incorporate them so we have any feedback that comes in prior to sort of the final adoption. I think we're looking at, based on this going through some of the operational lens and coming back to the board in the fall, that'll be probably the sign-off point for it. It's obviously in pretty finished form at this point, but we're still open to having any additional input. Thanks so much, everybody. This is I wasn't sure how we were going to manage this or what it was going to look like, but it was. I really appreciated the really thoughtful questions and comments. We should do it again. Need to move motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. I'll